So welcome, I guess. We're just, this is The Healer and the Dreamer, Astrology for a New Age, our first workshop, Astrology, Alchemy, and the Analytical Psychology of Carl Gustav Jung. Now, I've given this lecture once before at the Jungian Society in Comox Valley, and I've been doing it ever since. And then today I kind of edited the PowerPoint presentation I made for it, and then I got a bunch of new material. Yeah, you can probably click the next one, and then this is something I wrote about the workshop series, and this is a beautiful picture of the astrological man, or the analytical man, what is called the anthropos, or the perfect man, both half woman and half man, in a beautiful picture, and then a little nice quote from Origen, a Christian scholar of the 2nd century after Christ left, who said that even back then, that know that all the planets that you see there, they're within you. And I think that that's where we begin our quest for astrology. And it's interesting, you know, I was thinking about this. Astrology, it was developed by man looking for direction, right? The sailors, the people traveling the desert menu. They looked at the stars, and they mapped out the stars so they could find their way through, you know, to where they were going. And then it became a metaphor where we use the stars to find out where we're going in life, and that these archetypal energies, these planets, have an outer and an inner component, and the outer and the inner work together synchronistically. And so the magic that resides, it's not that one affects the other, it's just that they mirror each other. And that the outer faith and the inner faith are made of the same thing. So let me give you 2 summaries. You can give the next file, and then I put a lot of quotes on the board, and we'll read a few of them. And this is me, and we can go past that one too. Well, this is my story, and this is Jung, and then you can go to the next one. Okay. It's interesting how when you use a PowerPoint presentation, it's kind of your ideas organized, and yet I have a different list here.
What sign are you?
Well, that's not fair, but you guess.
Well, but your ascendant is there, your moon, so I could be picking up on all of it.
Well, you are good, you are good. Well, as obviously as it is, I have an Aries ascendant and a Leo moon.
Oh, nice.
But the Pisces sun is really hard to reach, isn't it?
It's your season. It's your season. When's your birthday?
Well, I just got my birthday 3 days ago, and then the Sun and Mercury were in conjunction with my Sun, and I have a Sun-Mercury conjunction in Pisces. So intuition and watery elements are familiar with me. But here, let's get back to the workshop. Okay. No, Raul. I can do this. So 2 things. I'm going to give you my history of how I came up with my material, and then I give you a brief history of how Jung came to his material, and then we'll look at the evolution of the workshop series, and then we'll go on from there, oh yes, and then we'll talk about the tools that I want you to start. One of the things that we're gonna do in the workshop series is I'm gonna share tools of integration, and then you can have some homework that you can do, you know, and some practices that you can integrate so that as we go along, you know, because what is the healer and the dreamer? And I will define it a little bit later, but the healer and the dreamer is for the artist, the spiritualist, the healer, who wants to integrate in his or her practice the insight that can be gained from a Jungian perspective of astrology and dream analysis. So that what we're proposing here is to give you next level tools to be able to read the chart, to read both the transits in your own natal chart, and to see the synchronicity that exists between your dream work and your astrological work, and how you can take the two of them together with the already existing practices in your life to make your journey that much more meaningful. So that's, in a nutshell, the healer and the dreamer, and I'll tell you more about it as we go along. I've been studying astrology since 1988. I learned how to make charts manually before the age of computer, and I must say I kind of prefer it that way, although since the computer has spoiled me, I can't do it anymore, calculating manually, that is. But prior to that, I lived in a monastery for 10 years as a Hindu monk, and my connection with the material world disintegrated quite young, and so I've always been kind of on the mystical side of things. As Valdi says, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking too much space. And so I've been kind of over the edge for most of my life. That's why I say that I've come to Jung through the back door. And so, you know, now I've made a life of studying Jung, but at the beginning it was mysticism that was really attracting me, and I couldn't really, you know, see the point of purchasing, but also buying the ideas that our collective were selling. I was just not buying. And so then 10 years in a monastery, then I left the monastery at my Saturn return, and I says, okay, this thing astrology, I need to study that. And then I started my studies, but then I went into a side business of restaurant business, and after one of them burnt down, and one was flooded, and then I got a hurricane, and then the last one I went bankrupt. Oh, before that, the one before that burnt down to the ground. Oh. And so then when I turned 50, then it became really clear. I went on a vision quest, and the universe said, oh, dude, your life is not ending, it's just beginning. You're going to finally do what you're here to do. So then I started my astrology practice. That was 11 years ago. And I started in this metropolis called Williams Lake. And so that was a very good place. One, very isolated. Two, a beginning kind of audience. So then I got to develop my ideas. I created my Astro Mandala table, which is my main tool for teaching astrology, and started getting on this process of becoming an astrologer and counseling people. And so very early on I realized that I didn't know enough about the human psyche, and I had repeated, in the business, Jung calls it psychic infections. And so I got subject to many cases where the transference was so strong, and that the particular readings triggered huge bouts of depression and huge necessity to do inner work. And then I realized after some very powerful readings that I didn't know enough about the human psyche, that through astrology I could use astrology and create a catharsis. I could really, you know, bring it down to what the problem was, and I could do amazing work doing that. but that when I caused the catharsis, when the catharsis manifested or emerged, the person's crying, they're having a breakdown. Oh, good job. Now what do you do with that? And then I found that I didn't know the answers to that. And I'd been studying the work of Liz Green, who herself is a Jungian analyst, and all of my studies for the longest time had been from Liz Green, so I was familiar with Jung, but only through the lens of Liz Green's work. As I was moving along in my studies of Liz Green, and I was moving along and doing readings, and then these repeated, psychic infection that I was going through, and also facing my own material. There were some violent depressions there where I just became really, okay, I got to get the tools that I need, and then I started very intuitively working through all of Jung's material. So as I was working through Jung's material, not in an organized fashion, but I would get one, I would find three in the used bookstores, and then gradually I started collecting the collected works and started reading it, and then I started working with my dreams, and then my dreams started guiding my practice, and then I started integrating dream work and astrology together. And so then the client would collect their dreams before the session, then I would offer the chart analysis, and then the dreams that were collected prior to the session would confirm the session, and then the lights would go on. And then that started becoming really powerful. And as I was moving along, then I started finding avenues for the dream analysis, and even at times I thought maybe I'll become a dream analyst versus an astrologer, and then I'm still navigating this ambivalence between the two, but the synchronicity is so strong that it's become, my work, the healer and the dreamer, astrology and dream work together. So then something happened to me in my studies. I read the Mysterium Conjunctionis. The Mysterium Conjunctionis is Jung's masterpiece in alchemy. It's the last book that he wrote. It took him 10 years to write, and it was done really at the end of his career. And there's 3 books that precede it. Is Alchemical Studies, Psychology and Alchemy, and an essay that we're going to analyze in its entirety on workshop number 4, called The Philosophical Rose, which is an incredible work of defining how the transference works from an alchemical text of the 15th century called the Rosarium Philosophorum. And in that book, Jung just introduces alchemy, and how alchemy shifted his psychology or confirmed his psychology and the things that he learned from it. Now, the thing about that writing is it's all written in alchemical terms and uses astrology as a way of expressing those ideas. So here I was reading Jung, but now I was reading an alchemical, astrological Jung. And that book really caused a huge stir in me. I went into a nice, big, huge depression after writing it. And then as I was climbing out of that depression, the words, the healer and the dreamer, came out. And so then the healer and the dreamer, what is that? The healer and the dreamer is a alchemical representation of the Hieros Gamos, or the sacred marriage of the 2 polarities of the soul, the masculine soul and the feminine soul, as symbolized by the sun and the moon. So then the alchemist had this concept of the divine union of the sun and the moon as the goal of the opus. And Jung's psychology was based on the anima and the animus, or the masculine, the feminine soul, and the masculine soul. And in that system, Jung found that the whole system of astrology and alchemy was actually a mapping out of the individual psyche. So that here, the alchemical opus and the astrological chart and the process of astrology maps out unconscious and conscious patterns and in such a way that as a psychologist, you could have a chart of the person's psyche. And so Jung started doing that from the very beginning of his analysis, and he looked at the angular relationship in a chart, the angular patterns in a chart. He looked at them as psychological complexes, so that the chart would become a mandala of expression of my fate in this world. And he drew us out from ancient times and from astrology and brought it together in the Mysterium Conjunctionis. And so the healer and the dreamer then, the healer is the solar archetype and the dreamer is the lunar archetype. So the masculine healer, the feminine, dreamer. And so that's the basic underlying principle of the healer and the dreamer. So that's an introduction to my work. Now we're going to go into how Jung came about these ideas. How we doing so far?
Good.
Pretty good, huh? That was pretty smooth. Okay. Sometimes I'm amazed by how smooth it goes. It's a good thing to be. It's much better than the wheels falling off and the crash and burn thing that happens when you're talking. You figure out, you forgot what you're saying. Oh, a little sideline, because it's impossible for me to have not sideline. Combustion. Do you guys know combustion?
Yeah.
Do you know combustion? Do you know combustion?
Well, I know what combustion is.
What, do you know combustion from an astrological perspective?
Maybe not. What is
So there's the kind of combustion that you do at 420, and then there's the kind of combustion that happens in medicine, and then but there's an astrological combustion. Astrological combustion is an expression that defines what happened. So we have the sun and the moon, right? And so we had the new moon 2 days ago, and now the moon's moved out of Pisces and is already in Aries now. And then on the 17th, Mercury turned retrograde. And then during the new moon, Mercury was moving back, right? And so now Mercury, tomorrow on the 26th, Mercury and the sun will be in exact conjunction. So the Earth, the moon's over here by now. And then we have Mercury in conjunction with the sun, Mercury turning retrograde in Pisces. And that happens tomorrow. And so a combustion is when a planet, especially the inner planets, meaning moon, sun, a moon, Mercury, and Venus. Neptune, Venus. Okay, so Mercury, Venus, and the moon, they hold their place between the earth and the sun. And so when one of these planets comes exactly within 1 degree of the sun, they become combust. And it psychologically, it has kind of the feeling of a short circuit. When the moon is in combust in the sun, that's the exact new moon. And the lunar aspect of the personality tend to be really challenged at that time. And the alchemists talk about it, the novilunum, how intense psychologically that is. and then so tomorrow we're gonna experience a combustion of Mercury between the sun, and my sense is the last time I did a post about it on Facebook, the day after combustion. So today I did the MC Starman post on YouTube. This is I have a new personality, you guys. Speaking of rebirth, last year we had this idea. I gave a lecture to the Union Society in Comox, and a friend of me captured me in a very beautiful pose, and a friend said, put a comment, MC Starman is in the house. So MC, you know, my name is Martin Comtois, so Martin Comtois, so MC.
So
and then MC also stands for Master of Ceremony, right? Of course, and then MC also stands for the medium coeli. The medium coeli being in the chart the high noon, and the 10th house cusp, the medium coeli, is where you look at what the destiny of the individual is. So then in that way it has a triple meaning, and so then I did my first post on Sunday, and today I did a post of hello, oh yes, combustion. And then I did a nice interview with my friend Dave, and that was so cool. And that's the MC Starman's gonna feature interviews. Anyway, that's my new persona. I'm being reborn. Enough digression. I get back. Okay, Jung.
Is that also Midhaven, the medium Kalolai?
The medium coeli. Yeah, coeli means sky, and medium means the mid sky.
Midhaven.
So it's the high noon point. Personally, I have Saturn right in conjunction with the 10th house cusp, and Saturn's always there. You know, it's like I can't really ever, you know, just take a week off or anything like that. You know, my mind is, you know, Saturn's always there. You haven't done any reading today, you haven't done any studying, you know, and you know, you missed the day writing. It's like, oh fuck. Can I take the week off? No. Well, yes you can, but they'll be neurotic the whole time. Saturn is a cruel master in the 10th house. And yet, we're making the best of it. So, now, so my tree. So that's good, huh? I've only made it to 4 slides in the show. So Carl Jung, and really, Carl Jung as a man, I could take, you know, just 12 workshops just talking about Jung and what, you know, and the vast, complex nature of the man. But without a biography, and without, you know, trying to go into too many details, and we're gonna take 5 workshops to go through Jung's work, you know, and so we're gonna talk a lot about him. But what I wanted to do today is kind of give you an idea of how his ideas developed and where he got this background, and how this alchemical study of the sacred marriage came about, you know, and what that did. So the analogy that I use to describe Carl Jung is that of a tree. And this is a tree where a man and a woman are coming together, and you got the lunar cycle, so it's really a perfect picture of the divine union between the masculine and the feminine, and that's really what Jung was about, you know, was to recover and to support the sacred feminine, so that we could have, you know, a union of the masculine and the feminine that would represent more the evolution of the human spirit. And really collectively we're going through this, you know, very seriously. So Jung as a tree. So that tree was born in 1875, and the ground that he was born in was, his father was a Swiss Reformed minister you know, a long, large family. Everybody was in the religion business, and so he was took care of a church and lived in different churches as he moved along. And his mother came also from really old stock of the Swiss Reformed Protestant Church, but in her family, you had what we call the gift, right? So she had dreams, she saw visions, she would see dreams and she would tell people, you know, what was gonna happen to them, and that gift was there. And also Jung's children had that gift, and Jung's mom was definitely had that gift, and you can see it in her chart from a moon Pluto conjunction. And then is that Sun Uranus conjunction. So Jung was born in that ground, and from the very beginning, and we'll talk about his dreams next week, but he started having powerful dreams from the time he was 4 years old. The first recorded dream that he uses in memory dreams and reflections comes from that. And then so dreams were always there to guide him, and at all the major junctures in his life, he made decisions in his process based on the dreams. And some of his dreams that he had in childhood, he took a whole life to understand them. Like this dream, you know, the first dream that he had that he can remember and that he shared, he says it took him till he was 65 to share it with the world. And he was a 4-year-old little boy, and he found, you know, in his dream, he found a trap door in the backyard. And he opened the trap door and found some stairs, and came to a rich green brocade curtain, and opened up, and it opened into a beautiful underground temple, much like a Hindu temple. And there was a red rug leading to a throne, and on on the red throne was a big creature about 16, 14 feet tall. And he couldn't tell what it was, but as he meditated on it, he realized it was flesh, and there was a light on it. And then he heard his mother say, "Look at him. That's the man eater."
That's the man what?
Eater.
Oh,
And that's the dream.
that's fascinating.
Fascinating, but that described his whole life there. The search in the underground, the unconscious, for you know, the phallic deity, you know, in the womb of the mother, the symbolism of the dream, and we'll look at it when we talk about the symbolic language of dreams. We'll look at that dream, and we'll look at other dreams that he had. So then deep, rich life, the inner life like that, and many powerful visions, and really animated by the struggle of his father losing his faith and being mechanical about his faith, and his mother, you know, going in and out of mental hospitals and being you know, seeing ghosts and talking to ghosts, and the deep psychological challenges that the mother had, and how the father was really inept in helping the mother, and how he was the one in the middle of that. So quite disturbed, you know. You could say that in the beginning he was a complex child, a disturbed child who saw way too much and understood way too much. He learned Latin when he was 6 years old, and he had a capacity for study that was uncommon. You know, by the time, you know, when his adolescent years came about, he started reading all of the classics, and because he knew Latin and Greek, his study no bound, and his ability to study was incredible. And then he was going through, he decided to become a scientist, and then he wanted to become a doctor, and he went to medical school, and in his studies, he was going to go into becoming a medical practitioner, but then he read some books about psychiatry, and he'd been going to seances, and his cousin was doing the Ouija board and was channeling different spirits, and so then he said, wow, I want to be a scientist, but I want to understand this stuff. So then he read about psychiatry, and he says, this is the place where science meets mysticism, meets these things. So then he says, that's it. Everybody thought he was crazy. And then in those days, you moved into the mental hospital, so he moved to the mental hospital, Burgosley Mental Hospital, which was famous throughout the world at that time. And then he kind of started his practice, and he was very innovative, and he started reading Freud, and he started his practice right at the turn of the century, 1900. And then as he was going along, he developed this technique that somebody else had started, and also at that time, Jung had learned hypnotherapy, so he could bring people into hypnosis, and he knew about these things, and he used hypnosis with his, crazy patients, and he used dream analysis, and he also was studying astrology at that time already, and then he started developing what is called his association experiment, free association. You guys know free association? Association experiment. So now we have these things where, the lie detector test and the test that you give to people, that's based on Jung's work on free association. Free association, you give a person, and I was thinking that one of the things we could do is do a little demonstration of free association together, where we can, so basically a free association experiment is you make a list of words, usually about 100 of them, and then you sit there with a clock, and you have your patient, and you say the word, and then whatever comes to their mind, they say it right away, and the doctor measures the amount of time and the reaction to the word, and so then, and he developed this, and he mastered it, so that now, so then he started doing testimony for criminal cases, and this system is still used now in criminology, and also in isolating complex. Jung would find the different words that would trigger unconscious, either hesitation or stuttering or any kind of emotional reaction. He says, oh, that's a symptom of a complex. And then by analyzing all of it, he would get to understand. He would study and say, wow, these are the problems, and then he would take that into analysis. Okay, so that's free association. The association experiment, and he became famous for that. And people from all over the world came and started working with him on that, and then Freud got interested. And then Freud and Jung developed a relationship, and then they shared studies of astrology. Jung went to a disciple of Freud who did Jung's chart. So then at that point, you had dream, you had free association, you had hypnotherapy. That were all tools that these guys were using to develop this new science called psychology. Then they started working, and of course Freud's psychology was one that really was constellated around the myth of, what's that lovely guy again? the sexual myth, the your secret
Oedipus?
desire,
Oedipus.
Oedipus, yes,
Yeah.
the myth of Oedipus. So Freud's psychology was based on that myth, and he was really quite rigid about it. And they were having all kinds of friction, and it's well documented that the friction was intense. And finally, Jung couldn't handle it anymore, and he published his book Symbols of Transformation, in which he defines libido as being pure spiritual energy, or something like Tao or Qi, and then that was the break between Freud and Jung. And so then those first 10, 15 years of psychology and of Jung and Freud really formed a real strong beginning of psychology, and it became really, these two men became famous, and during the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, psychoanalysis became really big, and everybody was doing that, and then they split up. And at that split up, Jung really went into a huge depression, and then he started his Red Book. And during his Red Book, then he, completely allowed the floor to cave in and went completely into the unconscious, and had incredible visions that he wrote down every night and compiled the Red Book. And next week I'm going to bring the Red Book, and we'll look at his dreams and stuff. And we'll look at how that came about, and we'll talk about the ideas that came at that time, and then Jung hit his prime, and then lectured and traveled so much between 1920 and the 1940s, and then the war, of course, and then Jung had, and so then all of his ideas came together really strongly, and then what happened now? Oh yeah, then he had a near-death experience. So had a heart attack, and he remembered leaving his body, and he is going, and he lands on the little, planet, some, flying thing, and he lands on it, and he sees a door, and he's heading towards that door. He's all excited because finally he's gonna know, It's like, yeah. And then his doctor flies in, and he says, "Sorry, dude. Everybody down there says they're not ready to let you go yet. You gotta come back." Oh, and he wakes up in his bed at the hospital at that time, and then he at that time didn't know whether he was gonna live or die. And then every night between 11 and 12, his whole room would be illuminated, and he would have like this big white light kind of experience, and this transcendental ecstasy he was experiencing. And it happened between 11 and 12 every single night. And then finally he decided, okay. And then at that point he realized, okay, now I'm not gonna hold punches anymore. And then the mystical part of Jung came out then. He came out with his article on synchronicity, he came up with all of his work on alchemy, and the Mysterium Conjunctionis as his masterpiece, and then his big commentary. And to me that part, we talk a lot about the Red Book, and we talk a lot about his work, and we talk about the 4 types, and we talk about so many different things about Jung. Oh, I realized I'm on a digression. Anyway, I'll tie it back up. So during his breakdown, and then at that time he says, okay, I'm not gonna hold up anymore, and I'm gonna really go and tell them how it is. And then so also he wrote his most important work on Christianity, Answer to Job, and Eon, commentaries on Christianity and astrology mixed together that are just really next level stuff. And so then and that's the part of Jung that hasn't really been integrated. And then, in the 50s, then his ideas really became widely accepted, and then he became Man of the Year in the States. He made the front cover of Time magazine, and 1962 came about, and he left. So my analogy of the tree. So that's the tree trunk, is that life, that work of Jung. And then from that, you had branches that came out. There are so many branches of the Jungian tree, and we can all talk about it, and we can come up with different ones. Joseph Campbell, and then James Hillman, and Mary Louise von Franz, and so many people. The AA movement. It was started by the guidance of Jung. What we call art therapy. Jung was the basis for that. Of course, dream analysis, but also what synchronicity did. And I'm adding one new workshop this year to the 12 workshop to make it 12, and that is number 5, synchronicity and developing emotional intelligence. And so that synchronicity, really, the importance of that concept. And when he wrote the piece on synchronicity, he wrote it with Wolfgang Pauli, who was a Nobel Prize winner in quantum physics. And they wrote together, and in the article on synchronicity, Jung did a full-on astrological study on relationships between men and women, and what in the chart made relationships go. So that's the kind of work he came out with, and that's, the 1950s, and that's after his big breakdown, and so his ideas started taking off, and so many branches came out of it. And we could study and we can talk about, and there are so many biographers that talk about everybody that touched. And then now we come into the 21st century, and all these trunks have gone, and these trees, and now we're like way up there in the tree, and there's leaves, and there's fruit, and there's little birds, and we think, wow, Jung, wow, he really gave a lot. But we look at him from the top of the tree, and we don't really can understand what his work is about. We can feel it. We can feel Jung's presence in everything, and yet, how did that come about? And so then what I say to people is that in order to really get to understand the tree, you gotta go back to the trunk. You gotta understand Jung. And so then when I lecture for the Jungian Society, and it's interesting, the Jungian Societies, they don't read Jung. They read other people, So I says, well, I have 2 goals, and then one of them, third, that is really unspoken, but the first 2 goals is to get you to study Jung personally, to get you to work with your dreams, and then to get you to take astrology seriously. And those are my goals in this workshop series. So I did the tree, and I did my own work, and I did Jung's work, and we're ready to move on to the next. How are we doing so far?
Great.
Good?
You're making me even love him more.
What's that?
I love Carl Jung even more now.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know some of this.
How are we doing on time?
7:40.
Yes, a little, was that?
7:45.
Okay, let's have a little break here. We're gonna use bathroom breaks, and then we'll reconvene.
Well, fire it up.
Fired up. Okay, so then it gets us to this little quote that I really like. In every adult there lurks a child, an eternal child, something that is always becoming and never completed, and calls for unceasing care, attention, and education.
I like that.
That is the part of the human personality which wants to develop and become whole. But man today is far indeed from that wholeness. And the next paragraph starts, but if he went to the forest and shut up for a while, he probably would find out what he's like. And then so for Jung, psychology was the understanding of the psyche And for Jung, the psyche was the soul. And so for him, psychology was the science of the soul. Can you get me the next slide? And so a neurosis for him was that inner child, or that other side, the unconscious part of myself. So for a woman, the unconscious side of your personality is a masculine animus, and for a man, the unconscious personality side of the personality is the feminine, the anima. And so then there's a mirroring that goes on between the two, and that's what we call love. And so for Jung, whenever there was an imbalance in the personality between the masculine and the feminine side of the soul, there was a neurosis. There was an imbalance, as if that child that we're supposed to be nurturing, as if that child would rebel against me and become my shadow. You know, and so that the shadow, that the neurosis is an effort by the soul to be recognized by personality, and if you recreate the union and the connection between the conscious side of the personality and the unconscious side of the personality, or the sun and the moon, then you would have a resolving of the neurosis.
Oh, say that again.
Yeah.
Over and over again for the next 5 weeks. Actually, for the next 12 weeks. But
Anima, soul, personality, sun, moon.
we go into this workshop on number 3, which is individuation and quest for the self. We're gonna make mandalas. I don't know if you got to see that one, but that you came right after that one.
I think I can't recall.
I think you came to the philosophical rose.
I did.
Yeah, but the one before that, the quest for, that's really cool. Really good material. And again, it's impossible to put all these ideas together, and I'm teaching and turning, and I probably should step to my agenda. Okay, let's look at it. So we did the Hieros Camos, and we did, okay, so we need to talk tools, and we need to talk, and then maybe we can have a little bit of a fun game of free association and see how free association works. And so this is the component for me. How many of you are familiar with the work of Julia Cameron?
I've heard of her.
Yeah.
Julia Cameron, The Artist Way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
I like that book.
Myself as well. And so then I see the healer and the dreamer made in the same way as the artist way. So like now we're doing the workshop, and the artist way was a workshop series as well, is a workshop series as well, and it's a 12-chapter workshop series. And then you have one chapter, and you have the essays that come with that chapter, and then you got the tools that come with that chapter, and you got exercises to help you integrate those, you know. So then I want to have that component in the book. And so we can talk about free association, but then we're going to talk about also morning pages. And in Jung's psychology, see, that's another thing, you know, that we can see, you know, because really, you can't really see the connection between Les Green's work and Jung, but actually this morning pages is what we're going to go about next week, about what is called active imagination. Jung named this particular technique active imagination as a way of giving the unconscious free expression. So the artist way morning pages are a set of handwriting that you do first thing in the morning, stream of consciousness writing. Basically, you and your soul sit down and you have a chat, how you doing? I'm fucking miserable, you know, and like, you know, and you know, and so pissed me right off yesterday, and I don't know what I'm gonna do about this shit, and I don't know what I'm gonna, you know, and then you go and you go and you go, and then all of a sudden you hear the other side of your personality go, well, you know, you're not, you know, you're taking this way too seriously, and you know, you should take the joke, and he didn't really mean bad, he's just an asshole, and you know, so then you work it out through writing, stream of consciousness writing, and you learn to develop a relationship with the other side of your personality through writing. And Jung called that active imagination, and he tied it up with dream work. So in the workshop series, I want to introduce these tools, and I want you to encourage you as we go along. And next week we'll talk about dreams, and we'll talk about dream journaling. And as we go along, it would be really good if you introduce these practices in your life. Another thing we're going to get to do during this workshop series, yes, we're going to get to work about dreams, but we're also going to do a lot of mandala drawings. So then one of the things that I ask you is you get yourself a nice journal, you experiment with morning pages, and then next week we'll talk about keeping track of your dreams. And as we go along in the workshop, these practices will bring about unconscious material that needs to be integrated, and then through the process of the workshop series, we're going to grow. And so then the workshop series is not just a process of understanding Jung's astrology and dream work and how it all ties together, but it is also an experiential experiential experience. Very well. It's you know, it's I see it as a practice. I see the healer and the dreamer astrology as a way of approaching astrology, and in the first run through, you know, we went through the material, but there was not really an emphasis on integrating it, and so I'm hoping to do that in this workshop series.
How do you suggest we start remembering dreams? Because I used to remember, but
We'll talk about that next
Okay.
week, but you know, when you know, you can prime the pump of the dreams. Priming the pump of the dream is to become intentional about it. To, you know, to write a prayer before you go to bed, do a little smudge if your dreams aren't coming. Anytime a little dream comes, write it down, you know, and then the pump will get primed and you'll get more and more. And if you go through the workshop series, my sense is that you're gonna have really powerful dreams as you go along.
yeah, I used to.
And what I'm doing for those who take the workshop series is I'm providing, you know, a discounted price on my readings so that you can take the workshop series and then you can come and discuss your dreams privately. Although we'll discuss some in the atmosphere of the workshop, it gets really personal, and sometimes it becomes uncomfortable to get the full meaning of the dreams, having private consultations. And part of what I'm doing in the website is that I'm describing the kind of services that I'm offering, and the type of service that I'm going to start offering is dream work and also dream sequence. But we'll talk about all of that next week, and you know, along with the astrological material. Blah 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 blah. How we doing? Do we have any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question. When you were just talking about like the dreams and all this stuff, what about, and like how you were saying about setting intentions before you go to bed, what about when you have like really intense dreams, how to come out of that in a better way? Like I had a dream last week that like really, like I woke up with like a racing heart. I had to like sit myself down and like take deep breaths, like I'm okay, you know. But like, how do you manage that? Can you do something to,
Okay, so
Maybe
let's
not.
tie it up because Nick asked the same question earlier in a bit of a different way, and then we talked about free association and this, the manifestation of complexes. Okay, so in free association, you say a word and there's a reaction, and let's say the word is mother. So how it goes, free association is whenever you say the word, then whatever comes to your mind, you say it. So I'm just gonna play around, and that's kind of jumped into my mind, so I'm gonna use the same way. Mother, cage, and then when, and so to me, that, the smothering mother, and so then there's an effect there. There's, so let's say we're in a free association experiment, the word mother comes and then I get mad, or, and then there's, so that emotional charge that is a trigger to expose a complex is manifests itself in astrological readings. Every once in a while, you say something and you trigger something in the person, and we got something, I gotcha, we found, the into the, to the complex that's really making the neurosis active, and it's the part of yourself that wants to be integrated, and then usually when you hit that button, there's gonna be an outburst of affect. So this word is used by Jung quite a bit, not effect, but affect, A-F-F-E-C-T. So an affect is the emotional charge that you experience in analysis or in dream. Basically, that emotional charge, really sad, I was crying, or I was angry, or I was, scared to death, whatever that charge is, becomes very important information in your study of what the unconscious has to say. If the unconscious hits you with a baseball bat with so much effect that the dream stays with you for days, that's the way of the unconscious saying, hey, I've got a message here for you and you gotta work it. And so then the affect, the emotional charge that's with a dream, is the intention of the unconscious to get your attention. And it may not be that tomorrow you're gonna get, murdered with a knife. It may just be that the knife of wisdom is helping you towards some important transformation. So then you can look at the symbols of what dream that is creating the effect. So the effect is the manifestation that, the unconscious is trying to say something here. And so whenever there's effect, you're doing the work, you're doing a reading, sometimes people are so close, to what's troubling them that within 5 minutes of the reading, they start crying, so then, wow, here you go. And the unconscious is providing lots of material, so then you don't overreact to that, you take it and you just work with it, and it becomes a source of joy for the client because they understood their neurosis from a perspective, and the effect is just the way of the unconscious getting your attention. Does that make sense?
kind of, but is there something that I can do to,
Yes, you journal that stuff, you talk about it, and you come and see me and we work through it. And we, that's what Jung did. Jung said that, I think I have that quote. You want to hit the button? Another one? That's a good one. The neurosis is thus a defense against the objective interactivity of the psyche. So, wait, that's the one. Keep going. One more? No. One more? No. Keep going. Maybe I don't have it on this one. Go back, back. Anyway,
Are these all from Young's book?
all of it.
Oh.
Which one was that one where in every adult there lurks a child?
I can give that to you later, or if you like. Where is
Name of
that
the
one?
book?
I think it's a development of personality, but it's in the back. We can return to it. But I'm getting distracted from what I was trying to say by asking questions. But that's what we did, asking questions. Where were we on the workshop?
Sorry.
No problem. No, it's my fault. It's my fault. It's not your fault.
Free association.
Free
Let's talk
association,
about
yeah.
Dream journaling.
Right.
Julia Cameron
Intentional,
practice.
Julia Cameron.
Yeah, so realizing
pages.
that the process is an integrative process, and also really to give you justice about the questions that you have. It's like this is the introduction to it, and then and what I'm trying to do for the 12 workshops is kind of stay, and because I introduced so much material at the beginning, and we're going to define that material as we go through, it's going to become more and more pertinent, and you're going to understand. If you expect to understand all right now, it's going to be difficult, because these concepts take a while to integrate. And that's the point of the healer and the dreamer, is to teach people how to integrate these techniques that Jung developed in a 21st century context. So to give you all of that in one evening is like almost impossible. So one of the intentions I had is to go through the okay, so these materials are now up on the website, and I'm becoming so organized. Look at that, I have a beautiful little flyer coming in. It's got the 12 workshops broken down. So we have the Astrology, Alchemy, and the Analytical Psychology of Carl Gustav Jung. Jung, the Man and His Work, Insights and Tools for the Age of Aquarius. And then the number 2 is the Symbolic Language of Dreams, the Symbolic Life and Integrating a Dream Practice. The number 3, Individuation and a Quest for the Realization of the Self, Understanding Jung's Main Concepts through Mandala Drawing. Then chapter 4, The Philosophical Rose, How Do We Heal, Who is the Healer, and the role of the transference in the healing process. Chapter 5, the new one, Synchronicity and Developing Emotional Intelligence, Magic, Mysticism, Dreams, and Astrology. Fascinating. The Cosmic Theater, Chapter 6, the Zodiac, the actors, the planets, the dialogue, the aspects, and then the unfolding, the transits. And then in that workshop, we give everybody their charts, and we get to do the preliminary study of the chart. Chapter 7, the Zodiac Mandala and the Geometry of the Self. So sacred geometries, the polarities, the elements, the modalities, and how they refer to Jungian psychology, the aspect grids, and so that's a lot of mandala drawing there. That's exciting. Chapter 8, the planetary archetypes and their myths, the luminaries, the personal planets, the social planets, and the transpersonal planets. Then chapter 9, the aspects and the personal myth of the mandala, the constellation of complexes and telling and retelling of the story. Chapter 10, the transits and the development of personality, the sun and the moon in the eclipse season, the personal and collective transits. Chapter 11, the spirit of our times, the spirit of the depths, important outer planetary alignments of our times. And chapter 12, the priestess rising, the myth of Persephone and the role of the priestess. You can go and see this on the website, and then the next thing I'm going to do is a description of each of the chapters.
Do we come in with our charts?
We're gonna be, yes, so
So
what
we
I would
should-
like to do, if you're gonna do the whole workshop, is get yourself a little book, cause there's gonna be some notes, there's gonna be some exercises. You know, get yourself a journal, start journaling, and then as we work through the dreams, we'll integrate that, and we'll talk about that material. And then we'll integrate the astrology on top of that, you know, gonna come out of that, understanding, you know, how to work with your dreams, and understanding the trances that are going on, and understanding your chart. It's, you know, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Mm,
Do we
you know,
come
I-
in with crayons as well to draw our mandalas?
Yes, colors, lots of colors, you
You'll
know,
tell
and
us
then,
when.
and then
Yeah.
a little protractor so you can make
Oh,
mandalas.
protractor, ooh, it's very mathy.
Yes, but astrology is math, and we're
Yeah.
gonna make so many mandalas, and it's gonna be so much
Yeah.
fun, and then astrology is gonna come alive as we go through the process.
Is it 12 weeks back to back?
Back to
Do
back
you
to
know
back
what
to
day
back.
the last it falls on? Which
I
month?
have no idea, I'm not that together.
Okay.
But also, since we're starting and all our publicity is not out, we're gonna have an internet component for those who can't make all of them. And as well, you know, after 4 or 5 weeks, I might start a new one for the people who are coming in late and who wants to start. And then at that point, we'll have concurring ones, so that if you missed one, you can catch it
Oh, yeah.
at a time. And then so that, you know, eventually you'll get all of them. But getting yourself a little book as you go through it, and you don't taking it as a course, that this is a course into integration of astrology, dream work, and the analytical psychology of Carl Gustav Jung. How are we doing on time?
You're 17 minutes after 8.
Hmm?
17 minutes after 8.
Okay, should we do an experiment in free association, just to show how that
Sure.
works?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay, do we wanna make a list of words? Or have you played this game, free association, with a friend, where you just free associate? Have you done that? Okay.
Can I ask one question before we get into
Sure.
it? I'm the person of questions.
Please.
When Carl Jung did his free association for people, how did he know which words to use? Or did he
He
just
made
pick
up a
random
list.
words?
He made up the list, and he worked on the list, and he has different lists that he did with, and different people did different lists. And so you can make your own list. And you can do this with a friend. You know, you make a list of words, and then you look at the reaction, and you use that. See, it's highly attuned. So, and the reasons why we want to do this and learn how to do this is because when we do dream analysis and when do astrological analysis, use that same technique, and it's really close to hypnosis. It's related, you know, and it's to learn to read the unconscious. See, it's one thing to read a chart to somebody, you know, and to come from the place where I know, you know, and here's the chart, and this is how you are. But to read a chart to a person and to use free association, it's like you don't care what you know, is you want to know how that person is living that planet. Just like we were talking to Tamara about Mars and Sagittarius. So you may have Mars and Sagittarius, and another person has Mars and Sagittarius, and you're going to live it differently. I'm not so concerned about my understanding of Mars in Sagittarius. I want to know in the analysis how you're living it. And you use free association, and you use that effect to guide you through the process of analysis. So Jung talked about his psychology. So in Freudian times, and as psychology was growing, Freud developed psychoanalysis. And then when Jung split up from Freud, he called his psychology analytical psychology. And analysis is that type of attitude that allows you to connect with the unconscious through the analysis of what see, because the unconscious communicates through symbols. And as you can see these symbols and you analyze them, then you can bring out the intent of the unconscious. That's why somebody comes to you, through your dreams or through your, astrology. They want to know what their soul is calling in to do. They want to know what their purpose is. They want to know why they're fucking neurotic, and why they're suffering so much. They want to know that, and if you can get insight into that, and you will get it from the chart, but you'll get it from this exchange of dialogue and from you reading the effect. And so then free association is the beginning of that. So we can do it different way. Does somebody want to play with me? Okay, so we're gonna do free association together, and you can do this with a friend, and it's really fun. Is I say a word, and you don't think about it, you say another word. That responds
Sorry in
it.
advance. I'm scared.
So then you say that word that you think of, and then I'll think of a word right away.
Reaction to that word.
Yes, and we'll go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in the free association game.
Okay.
And then we'll see what comes out of that. And so let's try to get the ego out of that one. Okay. Love,
Fear.
anger,
Love.
thinking too much.
Distracted. I don't
Always.
know. Never.
A reaction,
Trigger.
insight.
Foresight.
And so each
Reason that things pop in your head. There's so many. Like one of it was a song. One of it was like this.
exactly, and so then you can analyze it, and then sometimes you'll do this and with a close friend or something, or with a partner. Some really neat stuff will happen, so what analysis does, what you're trying to add, because as somebody will come to analysis, and they want you to help them, but their conscious mind is so much in the way that you can't really get to what the problem is. And through the process of analysis, you kind of break down what they're saying symbolically, and you can break down the conscious rational mind, and you can get into the unconscious mind, right? And when you get into the unconscious mind and you allow the unconscious to talk, then all of a sudden there's a rapport that's built. And that's what you're doing through the process of analysis, is you're teaching the person to have a dialogue with their unconscious. So that's what astrology is there for. That's where, all of these practice, so Jung did hypnotherapy, but he gave it up really early on because he called it suggestion. He said, no, I want the people to be conscious of what they're doing. I just want to impose my stuff, because through, hypnosis, you can tell somebody to stop smoking, basically, but it's a suggestion, it's suggestive, it's a suggestion therapy. And he says, no, in analytical psychology, I have these tools, and we'll talk about it more profoundly in the symbolic language of dreams, how these tools are. They're very simple, and it's a matter of feeling through, and to be paying attention to the symbolic language of the unconscious and how it's showing up through that process.
So the shadow's in that, right, in the unconscious.
The shadow is in the unconscious, yes, it's that inner child that wants to be integrated into consciousness, but who isn't given any time or space to do that. Therefore, it rebels and causes shadow. So really simply, Jungian psychology, the shadow, this dark stuff, it's actually the good part of ourself that's trying to get integrated, and that's whining. So like in the dreams, those violent dreams, to me it's like that side of your personality that wants to be integrated, and it's really making a lot of noise, and just saying, clang, 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 pay attention to me. And as you learn to work with that material, it's the same thing that you do when you're working through the astrological material or the biographical material that emerges in analysis. Blah, 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 blah.
Blah, blah.
How are we doing? Do we have any questions?
Yeah, about the psychosis that Jung induced. I'm fascinated by that. Apparently, I heard that he induced different states of psychosis, willingly brought himself into it, and willingly took himself out. What a fucking genius. How do you
No,
do
it's not
that?
a genius actually. And what he came to understand, okay? Because first he started working, with people who were becoming possessed by spirits, right? The Ouija board and the seance and your hand on the table and moving the table and all of that, and then he started working with schizophrenics and people who were actually psychotics, and developed these tools and work with these. But then as he became more famous, then he started working with average people, not average people, mostly upper middle class people that came from all over the world to work with him. So then, his practice changed quite a bit. So in the beginning, when he's working with the actual crazy people, and then later he's working with the James Joyce and the Roosevelts and the Rockefellers, and so he got to be hanging out with a lot of the with Einstein and Pauli, and so then his analysis, and everybody that was anybody went and got, it was the crave at that time. You went to saw Jung, so then as he studied these things and as he worked, he started realizing that psychosis and the peak spiritual experience, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay? So someone who is having a peak experience, an experience of the divine, an example of the magical, you're having a peak experience, and you're having a psychosis, it's the same experience. It's the same experience. The one that's having the peak experience, his ego is in service to that other. It's in acceptance of that other, where I can see that I'm falling in love with this other part of myself, and I'm having a mystical experience. I can hear God talking to me. I feel it, and I, write some amazing poetry about it. So that's a peak experience. It's the experience that the artist is after, right? A great work of art, every writer will tell you, I just wrote it down, it just came down to me. That's a psychotic experience. It's a split where the inner, the unconscious, and the outer are communicating in a really, really incredible way. A psychosis is the same thing, but the unconscious material possesses the conscious ego. The conscious ego is not strongly developed enough so that it gets overwhelmed by the unconscious and it becomes possessed. So then you have a psychosis. So it's the unconscious material, the archetypal content, takes over and possesses me, versus me having a devotional relationship with that material and becoming this amazing artist or this amazing poet, or so there's a different kind of relationship, but the experience is the same. And Jung arrived at these conclusions over time, and mainly through his practice, when he realized that actually, because Jung did yoga, Jung did all kinds of things that we, you know, today take for granted, but he was like, like Jung at a yoga practice where he was too stressed, he would do yoga, and he would do breathing exercise, and he would, do active imagination. There's this story. I don't know if I'll ever be able not to do digressions. It's part of my style. Okay. But you can. So Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, the autobiography that he wrote, is a great starting point in your studies. And at the end of the Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, there's a beautiful piece of work called is it the 7 Sermons to the Dead? Yeah, the 7 Sermons to the Dead.
You wrote this? Yeah?
Jung wrote that, so I'll tell you the story of how it came about, and he tells the story in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. So, Jung is sitting in his office, writing, doing his thing, and all the family, 5 kids, and the maids, and the wife, and everybody's in the house, and it's a Sunday afternoon. And, oh, you're taking us to the website. So then he's sitting there, and he has a view to the front door, and the doorbell rings. And there's no one, and he sees, and there's no one. And the maid goes to the door, and there's no one, and the bell rings again. And it rings again. And then the whole house feels like it's ghostly haunted. And then he hears these words. We've come from Jerusalem, and we haven't found what we wanted. And he went straight to his office and started writing. And as soon as he started writing, all the ghosts went away. And for 3 nights in a row, he channeled that work. Bam. In 3 nights it was done. And it's the 7 Sermons to the Dead. And it's a very Gnostic text. He talks about the Braxis and and all stuff that was just downloaded. So and that's what happens in the Red Book. When Jung gets into the Red Book, he says, I just went into this place where I allowed the floor to cave in, and I went in. And so the difference between becoming overwhelmed by a psychosis and having a peak experience is the strength of the ego. And so from the very beginning of his work, Jung really warned Westerners about Eastern thought, because Eastern thought is very different than the extroverted nature of the Western soul. The Western soul wants to take up the cross. It wants to take up the sword. The Eastern soul wants to go back into the inner, so he pointed out the difference. And for a Westerner to have a weak ego means the collective unconscious can possess me at any time. I can get thrown off, I can get, but if I have a strong sense of who I am, a strong ego, then I can use these unconscious things, and I can not lose myself in them. Which, that was a beautiful question, and here's my answer to it.
Wow.
Very powerful. So,
Wow.
Thank you.
some more questions about it.
Yes, we'll go. It seems like there's no way we're not going to get away with a certain amount of digression and a certain amount of questions and answer, because a lot of material comes out to it, and then it'll be interesting how. But Vinita, you had a question.
I just wanted to make a comment on that, because it's interesting how a lot of the New Age spiritual movement is about abolishing the ego, right? Where you kind of screw yourself over if you're not developing a healthy ego, because you just get completely overrun by the collective unconscious, right? If you don't have that strength
But you have to have the ego healthy.
Well,
right?
so we'll take this and we'll go a little further with it, okay? Because we just opened the Pandora's box and we might as well go all the way in. So what Jung says is that, see, if you approach from a Western mind, you approach this Eastern thinking, and you do your practice, but you don't have a really strong ego, and you're doing your practice, and you're practicing Eastern philosophy. He says it creates a state of sublimation, where you practice separates you from the ground. You're sublimating. So that sublimation is to do a practice in an extroverted way, not understanding that it's an introverted practice. You know, so like Lululemon yoga. Sorry, it's the comedian in me. It's the comedian in me. I am. Sorry. It's extroverted yoga, you know, it's a practice and it creates a sense of like, you know, I got my, you know, Starbucks coffee and I'm like, you know, walking off the ground, you know, I got my, you know, my sublimation. So then we have, you know, so the typical, you know, New Age stare, you know. You familiar with the New Age stare?
New Age stare?
The New Age stare, you know? You know, so it's a state of inflation where, you know, where you sublimate so much that you're always sublimating and it's like the, you know, you sound really good and you've got all the answers, but like I can't really grab you, you know? You're like sublimated to the max. Now the thing about sublimation is that it comes with an uncomfortable shadow. That's really, really difficult to control, but those usually repressed. So when you meet those people in analysis that are always sublimating everything, you're trying to get down to pay attention to the shadow. And so then that's the great danger of practices that are meant to be introverted and not extroverted. And we'll go into that in the workshop series when we go about when on the third workshop we're going to do individuation and the quest for the self, and in that workshop we're going to do mandalas and we're going to define all of Jungian's psychology and ideas through 5 mandalas that we're going to make, and then that will give you more ideas. But this is a really important thing, and it happens also in the psychedelic movement where we have a lot of
Is there a particular reference book or text or something that I can look at aside from class that like really touches in on that?
Well, that's for something that I'm thinking of introducing more and more, you know, and that is study circles. See, because Jung's work is not like a philosopher, you know, who tells you how it is. You know, Jung's work, and you know, it's 18 volumes, you know, 500, you know, it's like really thick scientific work. And Marie-Louise von Franz, she talks about how Jung approached a subject. Jung approached the subject in a circular way. He turned around it. And he turns around it and he looks at it from over here, and he looks at it from over here, and he looks at it from over here. And if you're reading through, it can be very painful. Because he doesn't really tell you how it is. He takes you through his process of how he's seeing it. Then every once in a while, you know, he just goes, you know, and then, you know, for about 15 pages, you know, it just like go, or sometimes a paragraph will just jump and hit you, you know. And so studying Jung systematically is very difficult, especially the first 5 volumes. That's his early volume where it's very Freudian. and very scientific, and he's very, and it's like dry, it's like painful. Then you get to the middle books, and oh, whoa. And then you get to the end, and it's like, woohoo! It's kind of like, you know, from an astrologer's perspective, you read the last 4 or 5 volumes, and it's like, you know, you got psychological studies, you know, alchemy and psychology, alchemical studies, and then Mysterium Conjunctionis, and then the development of personality. Noah's book are like, they're so current. Like development of personality, you can get a lot out of it. But to go to and to look at the work and to see, you know, where can I get this and where can I get that, or like where can I get dream analysis. So in volume 11, Psychology and Religion, it's a study of religion. Everything he wrote about religion. So the first chapter, the introduction, he breaks out into dream analysis, and for 35 pages he talks only about dream analysis. And then in explaining the religious experience, he takes a 40 dream series, and he explains this very religious dream series into, and that formed the beginning of him talking about religion. And he comes up with some great essays in there, and it's next level stuff, but not really that accessible, and every once in a while you get this really gold kind of thing. So I have the whole set here, and that's one of the things that we're doing for the book, is we're going through all the quotes and extracting the quotes and compiling them. And so part of the book, I don't know if you know Julia Cameron's book, but Julia Cameron, she has her chapter, she has the 3 or 4 essays, she has the exercise, and then she has quotes everywhere. You know, and so that's kind of how I see it. Jungian quotes and alchemical pictures and these essays and these exercises. And obviously there won't be that many digressions. That's why the workshop series will be so much more fun.
So the Western mind and the Eastern mind are different.
Absolutely.
And so what if you're brought up in this culture, any Western culture, but you're of the lineage of the Eastern?
That's a very interesting question, and every individual is a different person, and what works for one person doesn't work for another. And so that's one of the things that Jung says, is you don't depend on your tools so much, or you don't depend on the doctrine. You allow the person through analysis to communicate, you know. So then you may have a person that's of Hindu background who there's a beautiful, in that particular chapter I was referring to, where Jung talks about, you know, dream analysis. He talks about a client of his who was having this very peculiar neurosis, and he didn't think he was doing really good with her at all. And the symbolism of the dreams was all really weird yogic symbolism. And this woman, but then he found out that when she was young, her nurse was Hindu, and she grew up in Hinduism, and she suckled the milk of, and so then all of that stuff manifested in her dreams, and then they realized through the analysis that she had been affected, and that part of herself was seeking to become manifested again through the dream process. So then each individual is an individual, and how that plays itself out in an individual, you can't, use a theory and just have that theory and hide behind that theory. You got, so then it's a personal thing.
Yeah, everybody's authentic. Yeah.
Okay, so how are we doing on time? And do we have any questions?
1:45.
And then folks are going to have to take off. How was the material today, and did it sit together?
Mm-hmm. Did you get through all your slides?
No, I didn't.
No, can you go? Oh, do we have
Uh,
time?
Do we have time? You guys want
I
to
would
read some
love to look
quotes?
at them again.
Okay, let's read some quotes.
I'm sorry, I have to go.
You have to go.
I have to go, yeah.
We'll be in touch, Jennifer.
Yeah, we will. This is great. And, you know, appreciate all you had and.
Well, we can do.
Well, thank you for
Pick
joining
up-
us.
I'll pick up.